and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda. Entertain a motion to approve. I'll make that motion. Have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Mr. Longnecker.
Aye.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Connors.
Aye.
Ms. Sabathis. Aye. Mr. Malone.
Aye.
Motion's carried 5-0.
Declarations, council members, any with fill out, any conflicts of communication, any influence or decision? Hearing and seeing none, we'll go on to public comment. Everybody signed up tonight?
I do, I have 6.
Can we start?
Yes, the very first one is Mr. Charlie Troutner.
Welcome, Charlie.
Hi. I want to address a very important issue tonight as to the structure of, it involves part of the structure of a council meeting, and that is, I very urgently encourage and ask you all to please get microphones for all of you at the podium, and there's many reasons why I think this is necessary. And I am speaking tonight on my own, but there are other people, many other people that have the same thoughts, that we would all like to see microphones at your meetings. When I was on city council a few years ago, even at that time, sitting up where you're sitting, I could see the audience, and I could see times when it was obvious people were struggling to hear. I mean, I've actually seen it. And I wish we would have had them then. But now that more people are attending, and I think Edgerton is one of the very few, if not the only governing body meeting that does not have microphones, it would make your meetings much more professional, much more efficient. The speakers are up here with their backs to the audience. It would, a microphone up here would make it so much easier for people behind the speaker to hear not only the speaker, but then they can hear all of you if you have microphones. You have done a lot to this room aesthetically to make it nice and comforting to everyone. The plexiglass sign, the clock, some painting, it all looks beautiful. But microphones is just as important or more important than the aesthetics of the building, of the room. It is just so urgent and necessary for microphones. I've been wanting to talk about these for a long time. And we have an issue, not everyone hears very well. A lot of people have hearing problems. So it's a disability issue as well. And since the council meetings are not live streamed, someone that comes to a meeting can't hear everything. They can't say, well, I'll just watch the live stream and catch what I couldn't hear. They don't have that option. So please get microphones. I think a lot of other people would be very happy as well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Carrie Schmidt.
Welcome.
Yeah, microphones would be good. City council members, economic development cannot supersede your responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens or adjacent land users. Developers should not be able to request something be added to the permitted land use in the UDC to skirt around the red tape by passing the planning unit. There are 42 pages of rules and regulations for signs in Edgerton. Guess how many pages of rules and regulations there are on data centers and substations in Edgerton? 0. Not even a definition exists. This is because Zachary Moore and city staff bypassed the usual public hearing process, planning commission recommendations, and a vote by city council when they implemented a new permitted land use to the existing unified development code in the business and logistics park light industrial districts. This way city staff can say they've met all requirements to the already permitted land uses that exist and keep you and the public out of it. I want to know where Zachary Moore's finding of facts were. Were there any produced before he signed everyone's due process away? Where is the electrical load letter from Evergy? Why hasn't anyone produced that? For a building the size of DeMax, it would most likely hold 100,000 megawatts. In Bethlehem, that's hyperscale level, if you didn't know. And actually, all data centers being built these days are hyperscale data centers. Where is the traffic study encompassing all the years that it takes to build a facility? In your comprehensive plan, it mentions data centers 0 times, but you know what it does mention. It mentions warehouse and distribution facilities, freight terminals, rail transportation and manufacturing, and assembly operations. Data centers and substations are none of those. With just 2 signatures, Zachary Moore opened the door for Edgerton to receive anything similar to a data center in the business and logistics park districts. No modifications, no restrictions, no conditional use permits, nothing. They would be permitted by right because city staff didn't want anyone telling them no. If DeMac's application is approved, then Edgerton will be setting a precedent and more data centers will come here because they know they can railroad you. Although some of you may certainly be okay with a data center and substation, DeMac's size, I ask you, will you be okay if a 500 plus megawatt facility puts in an application and you cannot do anything about it because the city bypassed all formal processes? It is literally easier to add a hyperscale data center to Edgerton than it is to build a house here. If this application is approved, then you are opened up to any size and any scale data center. This decision was made solely by North Point and then Zachary Moore and city staff. You need to define it, study it, regulate it, because not all data centers are the same. Thank you.
Next speaker is William LaForce.
Oh, that's you.
Bill?
Bill, that's you.
Oh, me? Oh. I'm hearing that.
That's all right.
Welcome, Bill.
Good evening, everyone. William LaFalce, 516 West 4th Street here in Edgerton. I really wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I came across some quotes I thought would be very important. We all start this meeting off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you mean that? Do those words mean something to you? The 17th century philosopher John Locke had different views on human nature, the state of nature, social contracts, and political thought. Locke viewed humans as rational and moral, capable of cooperation in the state of nature, and people possess natural rights to life, liberty, prosperity, and generally can coexist peacefully. Locke saw the state of nature as generally peaceful but imperfect, that with natural rights required protection. People form governments voluntarily to safeguard these rights, and the government's legitimacy depends on consent of the governed. The social contract is a mutual agreement to establish a government that protects natural rights. A government that fails to do so, the citizens have a right to replace it. Where are you? Where do you stand? Where is your part of the contract with us? We stand here in contract with you. We believe that of us. Thank you.
Next I have Glenn Powers.
But you get it. Didn't expect to see me here, huh?
We're glad to see you.
No, what I'm here for is the new subdivision. All the houses are in, they're looking good. Can't believe they're selling that many houses. But when I was doing inspections, there was a lot of improvements that had to be made for a developer. And one of the improvements that should have been done, in my opinion, on that development is the culvert that goes underneath 207th or Bronze Street should have been redone because everything upstream backs up from that subdivision, from that street. So, and also 207th Street, or no, Edgerton Road. I noticed there's some equipment out there for asphalt, they're not asphalting the 207th or Edgerton Road. Well, it needs to be, ditch work needs to be done because water just washes across. It's not only when it's high rain, it's, if you go drive out on 207th now, you'll see that the culvert that goes underneath the road is water level right to the top, so. And, it's backing up in Mabry's yard, John Moore's yard, and our granddaughter lives in Mabry's house, and she has hard time getting out when it rains, just a little bit, because, the water backs up so bad, so. And I see they're trying to get that waterway mowed, but they've had a tractor stuck 2 or 3 times, so. So, and I took some pictures of them, I don't know if I can leave these and anybody can look and see what it is, but that's my complaint, so.
Nope. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The last speaker I have is Kim 22.
Yeah, I don't need to.
Next one. Kim.
Welcome.
She's coming.
Oh, I can't see behind them.
Oh, yeah.
My name is Kim 20, I live at 705 West Marywood. As you all know, many of us have been following this data center situation, and I have been strongly against it. Most of the supporters who are telling us that the data center is the best for Edgerton, many of them, like our city administrator or those who are in Elevate Edgerton, don't live in Edgerton. They are not going to suffer the health consequences that come with it. They are not going to suffer the consequences of not being able to sell their house in 10 years because the property values have plummeted due to this data center being put in. So they can tell us that it's so good for our community. However, numerous studies have shown that these are not good for our community. And yet they are still railroading our citizens into having these data centers. And they are using backdoor methods in order to push them through. As Carrie mentioned, these zoning regulations that were pushed through and were never done publicly so that people could have their say, the public could say something. And nowhere in the permitted uses of the logistics park is data center listed. So, on top of it, just recently I understand that DAMAC has resubmitted their second site plan, their plat, which has been approved. However, I don't believe that this went through public hearing. At least I didn't hear about it, but this was what I had seen, so I might be wrong. However, if it did not go through public hearing, then we didn't have an opportunity to speak against it. So, I have a report from the United Nations University with the environmental costs of AI energy use, and essentially it speaks to the expansive explosion in water use, electricity use, carbon footprint that is going on. And each kilowatt hour electricity used to train or run an AI model carries environmental footprints, including a carbon footprint from the generation mix, a water footprint from electricity production and cooling, and a land footprint from energy infrastructure, reservoirs, and fuel extraction. These footprints do not always shift in the same direction.
Thank you, Kim. is County Clerk's Office mill levy presentation.
Yes, so I'm gonna introduce, Amy Meeker-Berg, County Clerk, if you wanna join us at the podium. She's the County Clerk with Johnson County, and she had visited with, City Staff and Mayor Roberts, about, the township mill levies, and so we invited her to come and, give some information to the city council.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Amy Meeker-Berg, and I serve as the Johnson County Clerk. I'm here this evening to inform you of an update regarding the application of township general fund levies as they apply to properties located within the city of Edgerton. So we recently identified that the McCamish Township and Gardner Township general fund levies were not being applied in the same way. To ensure that taxes are being assessed correctly, we reviewed the issue and confirmed that under Kansas law, KSA 15-1 and 4, third-class cities are considered part of the township where they are located. So Edgerton as a third-class city, and the properties inside that city are still considered part of those townships for general fund tax purposes. So based on this statutory requirement, beginning of this year, tax year 2026, the county is going to adjust the levy application to ensure that we're in compliance with state law. And I have a handout if that's appropriate, because I think sometimes visually this might be helpful to see. Of course. This is a snapshot, and I'll let you get it passed around, of the Edgerton, properties, as well as the Gardner Township, McCamish Township. We have both township, general, and township outside of the city. And I know there's a lot in the legend there, but I think focusing on the darker areas in this, not the green, which are the parks locations, but the darker areas, that is the property, within the boundaries of Edgerton City. And so that is the property that we're discussing that's impacted by this, application. So if you look out on the left side, that is the McCamish Township, and on the right side is the Gardner Township. You've got the line going kind of right down the middle on this page. And again, this is zoomed in, just to really focus on those Edgerton properties and hopefully not to cause confusion. So when you look at this map, the McCamish Township on the left, the general fund levy has, approximately 1,099 properties within the city of Edgerton limits. That levy has historically appeared on property tax notices and been sent to those property tax owners. What we're really discussing is that the Gardner Township on the right, that affects approximately 167 properties. The majority of those are commercial properties within Edgerton. Those property owners, this will be new, and they have not seen the Gardner Township levy on their tax statements. But going forward, starting this year, into 26, they will see those. So our goal really is to ensure that we provide transparency and to reduce confusion, and I know this can be confusing, so I want to talk about kind of our measures that we're going to put in place to help hopefully mitigate questions and concerns. But we want to ensure that property owners on both impacted, those that have seen that levy historically and those that have not seen a levy, understand what's going on. So we will include an information mailer in a letter form with the upcoming estimated tax notice mailed to those impacted property owners in August. So that letter will explain the basis for the township general fund levies and how it applies to the properties within the Edgerton city limits. If property owners have questions, we would encourage them to contact the Johnson County Clerk's Office. We will have staff available with talking points to answer questions and help walk them through what this looks like. Again, the impacted properties on the McCamish side, they usually see that township levy, and so this will not be new for them. And just recently, McCamish did levy in 25, so they would have seen a line item with a zero levy. We don't have those finalized levies for 26. We will have them soon, so they will see them in August. For the township side, as far as Gardner Township, about 167 properties, that this will be new information for them. So happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
So I'm going, maybe you can answer this, but historically, what is there an average of mill rate that they've charged, or?
That's a great question, and that's tough to answer, because again, the levies are certified every year and that changes. And we don't have the current levy, that'll happen here soon in July and August, but we did an average impact based on the last certified levy. So for McCamish Township, for those Edgerton properties, the average increase would be about $6.29. Gardner Township side, that average impact on the 167 properties based on their 25 levy is gonna be about $14.60. Hope that helps answer your question.
Just questions, comments? Hey, yes, repeat that statutory site, please.
Happy to. This is KSA, try not to get it wrong, 15-104. Specifically, that third-class cities are still considered part of the township in which they're located. And that really is unique for Edgerton. You know, we talked a lot about this. Edgerton remains as a third-class city at this point and still has active townships. And so this is a unique situation within Johnson County altogether. This is the only place that it applies in Johnson County.
Who establishes the McCamish levy,
The McCamish Township Board.
and what is it used for?
Typically, what we've seen, and I can't say this will apply this upcoming year, but what we've seen in their budgeting process has been, expenses related to cemetery maintenance.
Similar to Gardner.
Correct. Gardner is also levying typically that township levies for cemetery maintenance as well.
So we did have some conversation, there's also on our tax bill, there's a cemetery bill that hand levy tax. So we had some conversation about that. It was separate from making. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Great, we appreciate it, Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8 is consider lease agreement with Johnson Drive Duplex 1 LLC for city offices located at 312B East Nelson Street in Edgerton, Kansas. Levi, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Since June of 2018, city staff have utilized the office space at 312B East Nelson Street to provide space for staff that could not be accommodated at other city facilities. There are now 4 staff members housed at this location as well as a conference room. On June 24th, 2021, council approved a 5-year extension of that lease, which is set to terminate towards the end of July of this year. Staff has negotiated a lease renewal with Johnson Drive Duplex LLC for a 10.5-year lease term beginning July 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2036. That lease rate starts at just over $1,200 a month and increases 4% each year of the lease period. A separate $250 a month fee will be included as contribution towards a capital maintenance of the building. That fee, however, is not subject to the increases throughout the contract terms. The agreement has been reviewed and approved by the city attorney, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments?
Another question. The Federal Reserve Board has a goal of 2% inflation, and they're expected to raise interest rates later this year to meet that goal. Why do we want to lock in a 4% inflation rate for 10 years, double the goal of the Fed?
I think the biggest component is about the ability to house staff within our city limits. Our places, the available places is very small. The number of places that are available for us to rent are very small. I don't know if you still have the calculation on the per square foot.
I believe it was $1.50.
Right, so the per square foot cost for this office space for us is probably less than $2 a square foot. General office space in Johnson County rents over 20. And so really it was about their ability for us to be secure our ability to use that space in downtown. It does have cash basis compliance in it, so if you'll notice the section I just put up here, it allows for us to, it doesn't bind future council, so if something were to drastically change, we obviously could get out of that agreement. But I think the challenge for us is there are not a lot of locations available for us to house staff.
And I had a question about the rate for 26 to 27. When the jump from 26 to 27 is a 5% increase, not 4.
Okay.
Isn't it supposed to be 4% a year?
We certainly can look at that. went through several iterations with the landlords to get to where we are today. So again, even at an increase of, really $60 for the square footage and the availability to keep our staff centralized in downtown, but certainly we can look at that percentage if council wants us to look at that.
How many square feet is the property?
Let's see, I think it's, I can look it up here, I don't know if it says in here.
I believe that upstairs is 800-ish square feet.
How many do we have staff there now?
4
Four.
in the conference room.
Public comments? No questions?
The only thing I can think of is being upstairs like that, when will it become a problem with the handicap stuff, you know? I know it'll be a bigger.
So we have
issue as
available
we get-
office space that if we would need to make an accommodation, we would just do it in another space. So
Well,
City Hall, the green space, we have we would just move, shift offices around to make sure that we can make any accommodation we need.
I was more concerned about the conference area, but that's.
Oh, we can always use the green space conference area if we needed to, so, yep.
I didn't know as the city got bigger, I didn't know if that was gonna become an issue
Sure.
down the line, we would have to
Yeah.
fix it.
But I think we can always meet those accommodations as we need.
I do wanna make sure that we stick to, if we're gonna agree to this, that we stick to whatever. If it's a 4% term annually, then we can stick to that. Whether the first year is an initial miscalculation or whatever, I just wanna make sure we're
Sure.
sticking to the 4 annually.
And we can go back and like double check that the numbers are correct, but they are actually explicit in the agreement, so.
Okay, yeah, I just wanna make sure
Yeah.
we're abiding to that agreement.
Of course, yeah.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Any motion to approve?
Yep.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. Longenecker,
Aye.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. Connors,
Nay.
Ms. Sabakin,
Aye.
Mr. Malloy. Motion's carried 4 and 1.
Okay, item 9 is, public hearing for submittal of Fifth Street area sanitary sewer project application to Johnson County for community development block grant, funding for 2027. You want to present that?
Sure, we're gonna have Ms. Rogers' presentation tonight.
Welcome back, Rob.
Hey, nice to see you guys. As always, I want to start by thanking you all for being here and giving me a chance to speak in front of you guys, as well as all the folks in the back row, and obviously everybody that did come and take time out of their day to come in to our city council meeting and be involved. So each year, Johnson County invites cities to submit applications for community development block grants, right? They're made available by the federal government. Johnson County states the primary goal of the community development program is to provide financial assistance to eligible applicants for the purpose of community development, right? Typically, Edgerton has applied for CDBG projects every other year due to the fact that we applied for $200,000. The 2-year maximum award amount. For the 2027 CDBG application, city staff plan to apply for a 2-year award of $200,000 for 2027 to continue maximizing available outside funding to leverage city dollars to continue the replacement of aging city infrastructure. The 2027 CDBG application was due to Johnson County on June 11th, 2026. To meet the submission requirements, the city was required to publish a 14-day public notice prior to the public hearing at the city council meeting, and Johnson County has allowed the city to submit the public hearing documentation project application approval following this council meeting. So the Fifth Street Sanitary Sewer Project is an eligible public facility improvement project for the use of these CDBG funds, right? All the city of Edgerton is combined within a census block group that qualifies for the funding of the area benefit. This project would consist of cured-in-place pipe, manhole patches, and point repairs. The quantities for each repair type would be analyzed by an engineer, but anticipated to be approximately about 3,000 to 6,000 linear feet of CIPP. The project will be sized to the maximum to maximize budget dollars should the market change drastically before bidding occurs or the award amount differs from the amount applied for. The project will continue the city's replacement of aging sanitary sewer infrastructure to reduce the amount of inflow and infiltration from this area. Cities who are interested in submitting the CDBG application like us to the county are required to obtain the views of the citizens through at least one public hearing held before City Council and advertise at least 14 days in advance in the city's newspaper of record. The public comment period begins on the day after the publication. The city of Edgerton published the public hearing notice in the paper of record on June 8, 2026. At the time of preparation of this packet, the city received no comments. The city will hold a public hearing today. So again, the CDBG reimbursement program in which cities apply for $200,000 over 2 years. The CDBG funds do not have a required match, but we do have the 2026 to 2030 $100,000 that has been identified as matching dollars through our sewer fund in 2027. This project is currently included in the 2026-2030 capital improvement plan, and if the city is successful in being awarded the grant, the staff will notify council, and depending on the amount of award, any suggested revisions in funding will happen at a future council meeting. I'm open for questions, concerns,
Do questions after we do the public hearing?
of course.
So we may have more out at that.
Perfect, no problem.
All right, you'll take a step aside there, and I'm gonna open the public hearing for, submittal of the Fifth Street Area Sanitary Project application for Johnson County Community Development Block Grant CDBG funding for 2027. Anybody wish to comment? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask the council if they have any questions or comments.
Which stretch of Fifth Street is this, off of Morgan, 56, or?
There's two identified areas. One is going to be just west of the elementary school in that Fifth Street area, just off 56 there. There's a couple of repairs we still need to make in there. And then on Fifth Street, just south of Nelson, there's a stretch of repairs we need to make in there as well. So those two Fifth Street areas will be encompassed in the sanitary sewer line.
North,
What's that?
north.
North of Nelson.
North
Yes,
of
yes,
Nelson.
yes, my mistake, yes.
Do you have an idea where we're talking?
Yeah, so between 56 and Nelson, essentially.
And this is really similar to what we've been doing.
Yes, yes, continuation of our same program of finishing lining off the clay pipe and making sure all of our manholes are in good shape, same as well.
So, okay, any other questions, comments? Motion?
I'll have a motion to do.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve, roll call?
Mr. Longenecker.
Aye.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Connors.
Aye.
Ms. Sabakin.
Aye.
Mr. Malloy.
Aye.
Motion's carried 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Report by city administrator.
The first item I have for tonight is the water meter replacement program from Mr. Burke.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. And so the city installed radio read water meters back in 2016. And from that time until now, some of the meters have been changed out due to failures, warranty items, things of that nature. And as they continue to age, a strategy is needed to understand and predict costs. Water meters are a revenue critical asset, which means operating them to failure is not a recommended model. At the time of purchase, there is a warranty that is a full replacement for 10 years, and then a declining percentage of replacement each year from years 11 to 20. And so typically, in order to avoid the spike of costs at that 10 or 20 years, or whatever the age of life of that equipment is, we want to avoid that spike and increase. And so we looked at two different models. First is this cliff replacement style. So there's the key assumptions that are listed there. 700 meters installed in 2016, expected life of 20 years. The battery risk inside of those is generally that 15 to 17 year, based on some conversations we've had with other folks who have meters similar to ours. And so you look at a plate replacement of just between that, years 13 to 20. And so in order to do that, there is there's a series of meters that have to start at 13 years of servicing all the way to 20, and so you'll see that kind of bulge where it peaks at that year 16. We found that that was not as conducive to then what is the rolling life cycle replacement style. And so this is a modified version of the aforementioned cliff style. It spreads the cost out to prevent a more significant spike in dollars. It moves to a model that is smaller, more predictable, and ideal for operating budgets. It applies a general rule of thumb to the first generation, as well as the future generations of assets that are in the system. And so the same key assumptions we held, 700 meters, 16 years of life, with that understanding that the warranty, it still has a level of replacement at year 16, but it's prorated after year 10. So we set an allowable window of replacement of 14 to 18 years with a hard stop at 20. And so if we look at that, that brings us to 44 meters per year. And so generation 1, which is the chart on the next page, will show up highlighted in blue. Will be considered in our existing CIP program or move to budget, which we will find out when we present budget here later this year. And keeping them and moving them to operating budget would include $13,500 for meter replacements at $350 each. This cost would adjust as cost of meters do increase over time, and it would also increase as we grew beyond the 700 meters. So generally, the second generation would begin replacement at then 2037 at 45 meters per year. And these meters could be the new ones installed at Dwyer Farms in 2024, as well as ones that are early replaced in generation 1. And so that chart there on the next page shows kind of the breakdown of ramping up into this replacement cycle. And so that would be this calendar year getting 10 replaced, which we have in the budget, and then next year going to 45. And that escalation you see in there in the color chart of 75, 75, 80, 95, 95, and then until we level out. And then they're based on life cycle with the assumptions of 16 years in order to prevent battery failure. If we start to identify and track by data that the batteries are on average lasting shorter than that, then we adjust this model and we change the assumption and then adjust accordingly. But right now, all the information is pointing that this is the recommendation to where once we get to 2037, we just hit that steady amount every year. And we find those in the system. We will start by doing them per area within the city, but then once we get more sophisticated, we'll just see that every asset will show up somewhere on this curve, and then we can run a report at the end of the year, what needs to be done the following year. Our city is still at a size where that's manageable, even if they're on the opposite side of the city. So as we get to future generations of these meters, they will just be as the asset shows up on this deterioration curve. So in summary, we are transitioning from a one-time capital replacement of first generation meters to this rolling life cycle replacement program, where approximately 40 to 50 meters are proactively replaced each year and funded through operations, eliminating future capital spikes and reducing failure risk. Some considerations that we need to watch for, one is customer complaint frequency. We also need to make sure we're watching meter accuracy, so at times we will test certain meters to make sure they're still within specs. One, because they are a revenue critical asset. And then should any of this data start to show up that is slightly different than these assumptions today, we will adjust whether it's a 16 or 17 year life on battery, or if it's reduced from our assumption. And we will kind of ebb and flow with what the data presents as it shows itself. And so we just wanted to get this in front of you, one, before you saw the budget that's proposed, because that does show a difference. When it was moved, originally it was in vehicle equipment, and now it will be sliding to operating budget. And so that line item will show these dollars as an increase. So we wanted to give you an awareness and an understanding of what those dollars represent and the method in which we were to spend those in order to keep these assets as minimal failure and accuracy, and keeping them alive in the ground because they're revenue critical. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Are these things rebuildable, man? I mean, I know we talk about replacement, you talk about brand new ones, replacement, but are they rebuildable? I mean, they got batteries in them and stuff like that.
So to a certain point, yes. I can't take them apart and replace a battery.
Well, but I
So
mean,
there
as
is-
far as manufacturing, rebuildable.
Yes, there have been, now, I don't necessarily know how many times we sent them off under the warranty, they've either rebuilt them or sent us new ones. Both have happened, but that is not generally something that staff has done, it's what we send off, especially because prior to this year, or after this year, we're still in our 10-year warranty of full replacement. And so they have rebuilt some, they have sent us new registers, which is different than the whole housing. And so it's a mixture of all of the above. But they can rebuild parts of them, yes.
I didn't know if it was something that could be taken out when it's time to replace them. I mean, we don't know that it's completely wore out or anything. It could be rebuilt and used again, is what I'm not talking about warranty, I'm talking about to just the replacement.
So the rebuild like if we pull one out at that assumed end of life at 16 year, I think eventually the data will show that we can predict when the end of life is, and that we try to minimize replacing them early, so we can keep the life expectancy, but still replace them at the right time before statistically that they should fail by battery. That's rather than keeping them. But they're like the metal part of a meter, that can last considerably longer. And so there is an option to take the register out and keep the metal part in the ground, but that's all based on a number of components that will hit the field at that time.
I would add to what Dan's saying too, is you'll remember later, the first change, when we first went to this, part of the conversation was there wasn't consistency in the actual reading. So there was wear within the meters, so they weren't registering all the flow. And so we seen a pretty significant, increase in revenue because we were actually getting the water.
But also a response from the public when they became more accurate.
Yeah.
A member of the public was on council then too, maybe when we went through that process. But I think part of it, what he was talking about from that revenue critical piece is that finding the right sweet spot where it's still accurate, but you wanna get to it before that accuracy fails, right? Because if you take out one that isn't reading, isn't collecting the revenue, where the city is buying the water but not receiving the revenue for that water purchase, and then all of a sudden, it goes more accurate. The resident experiences all of a sudden a more accurate meter that is, they give a lot of feedback related to that.
Yeah, I think I hear you right, you're asking, like, would it be more beneficial financially under a maintenance plan versus a replacement plan? Is that what you're asking?
Possibly,
I didn't know if
I didn't know if
that
it
was
was, I know the ones Don's talked about, the old style. I didn't know if the parts were wore out.
They do still, cause especially for those that have more flow, so really when they first came to present the meters to us, which I know was before Dan, but they talked really about the amount of water going through it is really the indication rather than the year of it. It's the gallons of water that can affect its reading capability. So like, especially the ones like at the school's a relatively high water user, so they send more water through than maybe a household that has only one individual. And so, again, you wanna be cognizant of what that balance out. But I do think that there reaches a point where the replacement has to occur. It cannot be, it can't unfortunately just be a maintenance piece. And so I think really our goal for tonight was to have this sort of policy discussion with council, present what we believe is the right program, and get consensus that you all are comfortable with that so that we can use that in our budgeting going forward.
Well, I think it's a good idea that we keep up on it, because I know they have to be fixed and replaced down the line. I just didn't know for sure.
Time flies and here we are.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I said this originally when you brought this up a couple of months ago, but I appreciate you being proactive in this.
Thank you.
Saves money in the long run.
And the intention is to remove the asset from the ground right before statistical failure. And if we can, like with as we have data that starts to stretch where that line is, we will respond accordingly and try to maximize the dollar, not replace good assets. That one comes with time and data. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Everybody comfortable with what they presented? Yep. Alright.
So the second item I'm gonna have Dan do while he's at the podium before I bring, Mr. White up from Columbia Capital is to do the, walk-on item that's at the dais for the council. So this is a consideration of a memo of understanding with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And I'll turn it to Dan.
So there was a packet furniture place here at the dais, that is this discussion as far as our agreement with the KDHE. So in late 2024, KDHE contacted the city regarding potential stormwater concerns associated with development of logistics park in the city. To understand these concerns, KDHE researched and sampled area streams to identify any possible correlation to the condition of Hillsdale Lake, finding that agricultural activity and urban point source discharges have impacted the lake. During the initial development of LPKC, the city of Edgerton proactively adopted stormwater management standards focused on mitigating stormwater quantity. As a result, multiple detention basins were constructed throughout the development area to temporarily store runoff from major rainfall events while allowing smaller storm events to pass through the system. These facilities reflected industry standards at the time of construction and fully satisfied all applicable regulatory requirements. Since that time, advancements in stormwater management practices have demonstrated that quantity control alone may not adequately address water quality concerns, including the transport of sediment and nutrients through stormwater systems. In many communities, additional stormwater quality requirements are implemented through the MS4 program. However, Edgerton has not reached the population threshold that would require participation in the MS4 program. In mid-2025, KDHE approached the city to discuss a collaborative path forward that would balance the stormwater management expectations commonly applied to larger municipalities with the city's current regulatory obligations. These discussions resulted in the development of a memorandum of understanding between KDHE and the city. Under the proposed MOU, the city agrees to undertake the following actions. We would develop and maintain a list of all commercial and industrial property and their respective property owners within city limits having an impervious surface area greater than 8 acres. The city shall ensure all property owners identified on this list are aware of the requirements of this MOU. Develop and maintain a map which shows the locations of stormwater management structures, inlets, outlets, or outfalls, stormwater conveyance, receiving streams, and the proposed sampling locations. Develop a long-term sampling plan designed to assess the impact of water quality from stormwater discharges of the properties identified under this MOU. All analysis conducted under this MOU shall conform to the requirements of 40 CFR Part 136 unless otherwise specified, and shall be conducted in a laboratory accredited by KDHE. We would then develop requirements to ensure long-term operation and maintenance of all existing stormwater management structures on properties having an impervious surface area greater than 8 acres that were originally designed and constructed in accordance with Edgerton UBC. The requirements shall include site-specific maintenance plans and routine inspections. At a minimum, the maintenance inspections shall be performed annually by qualified stormwater personnel. Assess all existing stormwater management structures for water quality improvements and utilize these assessments to identify possible design enhancements that minimize the water quality impacts from the existing stormwater management structures. This assessment shall be conducted by a professional engineer or landscape architect. Adopt a post-construction B&P design manual that will apply to all future commercial and industrial development and redevelopment projects greater than 8 acres. This shall include adoption of supportive ordinances to ensure long-term maintenance of all B&Ps, designed using the adopted manual. Maintenance requirements shall become a part of any sales or exchange agreement for the land on which the permanent post-construction stormwater management measures are located. The post-construction B&P design manual should also be encouraged for any development or redevelopment projects over an acre. Develop and distribute tailored educational materials for property owners that emphasize best management practices for parking lot sweeping, winter road maintenance, pesticide, fertilizer application, snow prevention and cleanup, and other activities that negatively impact water quality. Annually, the city is required to report results of all actions and results found as lined out in the agreement. As staff continues to evaluate the specific requirements and implementation strategies associated with the MOU, updates will be provided to the council as additional information becomes available. These requirements are not currently budgeted. Any resulting expenses will need to be accounted for and included in future budgets as they are planned and approved. KDHE is currently completing its internal review and approval process and will provide the city with a final version of the MOU for execution under completion of these approvals. The proposed MOU is also under review by our city attorney. Any actions to the city to execute the agreement will be contingent on his final review and approval. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions?
Have they given us an ETA for when they expect to have the final review?
on their internal approval process?
Yeah.
Not an ETA, but they said any day now, so not necessarily a direct answer to your question.
KDH kind of works at full speed.
So this isn't the actual MOU?
There is an MOU that was included with the packet.
Yeah.
That's also what's under their approval process with their legal problem.
We don't anticipate any changes, but they leave themselves the ability to,
To change it for
so those would go through review from city attorney, and then we would ask the motion to include the ability for mayor to authorize pending approval from the city attorney.
Other questions, comments?
So we're not quite the size for MS4 yet. What is that size?
I believe it is 10,000 population.
That's gonna be,
The MOU does state that at that time, this MOU is the null and void, because we would fall under the regular MS4 provisions.
Yes, we will. I do want to make a comment that, I really appreciate staff's time and KDHE in working through this. It was a pretty heavy lift on both sides, in my opinion, from KDHE and staff. There's more to come. I know Dan and Beth and staff in general has been working on the implementation of this. You know, I think KDHE, I thought, has been, really open, you know, and actually somewhat impressed that, you know, a town that wasn't required to do any of this had already done some things in advance, cause we weren't required to do many things that we've already done. So it's been a real good cooperative, effort to come to this point. You know, I do actually recommend that we move forward, cause as we all know, we actually get our water from Hillsdale too, so we do care about the quality of the lake, no matter what the naysayers may say, so, kudos to everybody that was involved in this process.
well, I know we went through quite a bit of trouble back when we first started this, back when intermodal started, you know, stuff done right.
Yeah, we did.
We went by the standards, the standards are changing.
Yeah, we went by standards that were APWA standards, and this brings a little bit more to the
Yeah.
table, which is good, it is good. It's positive. So,
even though we're nowhere near the 10,000, I'd still like to do better.
yeah, and I think this is a path forward. So, and then it gets reviewed, it'll be reviewed, really, KDHE's gonna see the reports annually too, so, what, the tracking of it, I think will be as important as anything, so the same. So, yeah, I would entertain a motion to approve, pending, city attorney approval and authorizing the mayor to sign.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Mr. Longnecker.
Aye.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Connors.
Aye.
Ms. Sabathis.
Aye.
Mr. Malloy. Motion is carried 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So the last item on my agenda, on the city administrator report is to invite, Jeff White from Columbia Capital to come forward. So if you all remember, several years ago when R&R first got passed, then Jeff came and gave city council, before we started budget, an update, related to, all things, new and upcoming in those efforts. And it was a very active legislative session last year, and so Jeff did a presentation at the local, finance officers. And we thought it was super helpful. It had a lot of great information in it. So as a kickoff, another kickoff to the budget this year, we invited him to join us again.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jeff White with Columbia Capital. Great to see many old faces, sorry, mine too, and new faces as well. Pleasure to be here. So I gave this presentation initially at a meeting of the Eastern Kansas GFOA, and that comes with lunch, and I ruined Karen's and Justin's appetites, and they decided I should come and ruin your evening as well. This presentation is a little bit like the Easter Bunny coming to steal your children's candy rather than deliver it. So I tried to deliver the message here a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the content is pretty serious. It is going to be a pretty challenging time to be doing a budget. So over the last, if you think about it, over the last 5 or 6 years alone, we ran into COVID. That led to ARPA, which provided some nice resources, but believe it or not, those dollars are still being spent. They have to be fully spent, we promise, in 2026. But paperwork and quarterly reporting and all the stuff that came with that, we had that shock run up in interest rates in 2022 that no one was really expecting. Just a year ago, we had the first day of the tariff announcement, which pretty much closed the municipal bond market down for 3 weeks, and many other markets as well, while people tried to figure out what was going on with that. And maybe the largest indignity of all is, just a simple can of Diet Coke these days can be $5 in some places. So again, I say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the environment in which you prepare your budget for fiscal 27 is maybe as challenging as it's been in 2 decades in Kansas, maybe something along those lines. And we have just many challenges that are coming at us from the federal level, from the state level, and from unexpected places, the Kansas Bankers Association, bond rating agencies in some places, and then of course the very interesting new technologies that we're seeing, which are both helpful and hurtful here. So as I mentioned, I think it's going to be a really challenging budget cycle for you, and one where if you take away any message tonight, it's really to be thoughtful and strategic. I think you're preparing a budget, particularly as we talk about state law, you're preparing a budget not just for fiscal 2027, but potentially really for the next maybe 2 decades. And I'll explain that as we go through. So starting at the federal level, when I say Congress is trying to kill us, what we have seen over the last, we have this never-ending federal budget cycle where there's no budget adopted, right? We just move from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. Every once in a while, there is a reconciliation process that pops out a tax bill and some spending and things. But what we are seeing is something like I saw when I first started working in local government a billion years ago in 1990, where all of this devolution, this let's push responsibilities down to states without funding, was known as reinventing government, which was just a silly way to say from Congress to the states, now we're not paying for that stuff anymore, you all figure it out. And of course, we all know from personal experience sitting on boards like this and having lived in the state for a while, that when the state is broke, they inflict that pain on us, and they tend to do it in fairly creative ways. At the same time, we're seeing state governments do all kinds of crazy things to their own budget. I mean, we're gonna watch Missouri vote on whether or not to eliminate 40% of the revenue for their general fund coming up here in the next month or so. And so again, there's no reason to believe that the next legislative session in Kansas is gonna be different than the last, and that's something that we're gonna have to pay very close attention to. I'm gonna linger on this one for a bit because this is likely to be the most impactful, and it was one that I spent a lot of time in the winter and fall dealing with. And you may not recognize the legislative number HB 2745, but this was the bill that would fundamentally change the way that Kansas local governments can raise property tax revenues. And whether you agree that needs to happen or not, I think we probably all could agree that the method by which the legislature went about this would be really negatively impactful on local governments across the state in a number of ways. And so the fundamental tenets of that property tax bill were largely to eliminate local control over the ability to set property tax rates. So the bill would have provided that property tax collections, not just rates, but collections could not exceed the rate of inflation in any year. And there was an additional provision that would have allowed a super minority of individual taxpayers to sign a petition, and if they signed the petition, you couldn't raise the amount of taxes collected from one year over the other by even $1. That's pretty challenging. We're all facing issues with inflation. Local government budgets are not immune to the same inflationary pressures that your own household budgets face. And the ability to capture incremental increases in taxation is very important for the livelihood of local governments. There are a couple other features of this bill that were particularly troublesome to me. When I started working in local government in Kansas, we were under what was known then as the levy caps. And for those of you that have been around or remember going back to sort of the turn of the century, there was a time where local government levy rates were capped. But there were 3 exceptions to those caps. One was new construction. So if somebody came and they built a new building in your community and that new building came on the tax rolls, you were able to capture the value of that new construction against your levy rates, and to capture that revenue. 2745 would not permit you to recognize the value of new construction. I can't think of a single state in which we work that has property tax limitations where that is the case, where new construction is not permitted to be recognized. Another one, and this is particularly important for Edgerton, given your economic development strategy over the last decade and a half, is properties rolling off of abatement would also not be accretive to the value of the city's ability to generate taxes. So the benefit of your bargain in doing a property tax abatement is for 10 years, you give up a portion of the levy that you would have otherwise collected on a building, and then in year 11 going forward, that building comes on the tax rolls, and you get more dollars to help provide services in your community to support the growth that comes along with that economic development. The legislature would have taken that away. So those features are incredibly important. And then the last one is this. In the last levy cap regime, there was an exception for levies raised to pay for principal and interest on general obligation bonds. That is important because Kansas has what in my business is known as the gold standard of bond issuance security. We have something called unlimited tax general obligation bonds. What that means is when the city issues a general obligation bond, you are entering into a contract with the holders of your bonds, the investors in your bonds, that if the general resources of the city are not sufficient in any year to make the principal and interest payments on those bonds when due, that you have an obligation, a contractual obligation, to raise property taxes as much as you need for as long as possible in order to make those principal and interest payments. So when we talk about unlimited tax, what that means is, again, that levy rate can increase to the moon if it needs to in order to make those debt service payments. That's why bondholders of bonds issued by Greensburg, Kansas lost not a single dollar when that community was nearly wiped from the map. Same thing in Joplin, because those bonds that were issued by Greensburg and by Joplin were, if they were general obligation bonds, they were unlimited tax. And so that community had both the ability and the obligation to raise its mill levy rate in order to produce enough income to pay the principal and interest. There are in some states, Michigan and Illinois as examples, another kind of general obligation bond called a limited tax general obligation bond. And depending on the state, the implementation is a little bit different. But I'll pick on Illinois for a second. Illinois has a pretty robust limited tax GO market. What that means is that the bondholders are entitled to an expectation that local governments will raise a specific dollar amount, not to exceed dollar amount, to pay principal and interest. And the levy rate can raise until that specific dollar amount is provided for. So it is limited by amount, but not limited by rate. So we call that a limited tax bond. What the legislature would have done in Kansas was to create a situation where we had neither unlimited tax nor limited tax bonds. So they would have eliminated the unlimited tax part because you couldn't raise your levy, more than either 3% or 0, depending on whether that petition was filed or not, even if you needed to pay the principal and interest on your bonds. And the implication of that is your bond investors have no idea what the security for repayment for the bonds would be. What's the consequence? If you, Edgerton, issue bonds after that legislation were passed, I can almost guarantee you that you would have no investors on those bonds. You would not have access to the capital markets. It's already a challenge for a community this size to give the attention of the bond market today, even in the existing unlimited tax regime. There's a lot of reasons for that have nothing to do with Edgerton. It just has to do with the fact that the market is busy. We sold something like $12 billion worth of GO bonds across, or not GO bonds, but bonds in general, taxes and bonds in general, across the nation. And if you come to the market with a $3 million issue, you're competing for the attention of investors for a $300 million issue. And they're gonna spend the same amount of time doing credit analysis for Edgerton as they are for the state of Illinois. And if they can buy a state of Illinois deal for $300 million, they fill their portfolio needs a lot more quickly than they do with a $3 million deal here. So this is a real challenge and a real threat to most of Kansas's communities. The median size city in Kansas is about 2,500 population. So we have 25 cities of the first class, 10,000 population and higher in the state. Most of the cities in the state are small, and when they issue bonds, it's relatively infrequently, and the dollar amounts tend to be small as well. So this is a real challenge. So my suggestion to you is this. This is likely the last budget cycle in which you will have any sort of local control over what your mill levy is. And as a result, I strongly encourage you to think about the idea, if you have future needs and you want to provide yourself with protection for the next decade or two, to raise your levy. Not popular, but again, I'm the Easter Bunny who steals candy from your children. The other thing that I would suggest is, because again, we don't know what's going to happen with respect to our bond market, if you have capital needs that you were thinking about issuing bonds for over the next 2 or 3 budget cycles, I would strongly encourage you to think about accelerating those into this year at a time where we can still issue debt with that unlimited general obligation pledge and not be at risk that you wouldn't have market access going forward. There are other states where access to GO bonds is limited and you don't have to look very far. In Missouri, if you want to issue GO debt, it has to be voted. And not only does it have to be voted, but it has to be voted by a supermajority of voters. So depending on the election that you go to, it's either 3/5, so roughly 57%, or 2/3 of voters have to approve those. And so you have communities like Raytown, Missouri, for instance, which had a number of bond ballots that passed by a majority of voters year after year, but fell short of that 3/5 supermajority threshold. You had one case where they had 3 different bond ballots, where they had one that got the supermajority and one that didn't. So folks like to vote for streets, they like to vote for public buildings less so. And so you have the situation where some capital investment gets done and some does not get done in those situations. All right. So we also have a gift from the state as well in the expiration of the Johnson County countywide public safety sales tax. This is impacting most communities in the county. I think there's conversation about restoring that tax in somewhere, at least taking that restoration of that tax to the voters. But there's likely to be a gap for a budget season or two. And this is again going to leave a hole in your budgets that you may not have been expecting. The other fun thing that happened in the 2025 legislative session that I think is an important reminder is that the Kansas Bankers Association tried to steal money from the folks sitting behind me. They tried to get legislation passed that would have effectively reduced the amount of interest earnings that you could have gotten on your idle cash by 2 full percentage points. So let me just put a point on that. I just happened to look at your investment reports for the end of last month. The city had about $20 million in funds under investment. 2% on that is $400,000 a year. That is 4 mills of property taxes that would have evaporated from the pockets of the people behind me, and they would have gone into the pockets of Kansas banks. That legislation came within a hair's breadth of passing. The committee, before which the banking industry went to, was so friendly to those folks that it would have sailed through, but not for a lot of local governments jumping up and down and making sure that that didn't happen. There's really no reason that KDA couldn't bring that legislation back at some point. It had a ton of traction in the legislature. And again, sort of a surprise, you might not expect that that would be a threat to your budget. But bills like that do pop up from time to time, and it's important. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time lingering here because this is not a terribly relevant point to how Edgerton manages its finances. But just to give you a quick point on this, so when we go out to the bond market, we get a bond credit rating. And that credit rating is like a grade from a third-party entity. You've heard of some of these folks, Standard & Poor's or Moody's or Fitch. And a general obligation rating is about 50% about your economy and a little bit about the state that you're in and the revenue-raising capacity that you have, and about 50% about how you manage your own budgets and your own finances. So do you produce a balanced budget every year? Do you have good cash balances? Is your debt burden reasonable? Those kinds of things. So about 50-50 on that. We have always said that the general obligation bond rating is insulated from debt that you might issue for other purposes, including economic development. We had a situation recently where Overland Park issued bonds that were not general obligation. They were secured solely by the revenues of a particular project. You may have been there. I'm going to pick on a prairie fire on 135th Street, just east of Metcalf. The city issued bonds at the behest of the developer, supported solely by the revenues of that project, and that project did not produce the revenues that were expected, and those bonds are in default, so they could not make the full principal and interest payments. The city had the bondholders had no recourse to the city's general fund. They knew that when they bought the bonds, and so those bonds carried interest rates of like 6.5%, something like that, tax exempt, which is about somewhere between 9 and 10% on the taxable equivalent yield. Those investors knew what they were buying. Standard & Poor's in the most recent general obligation rating for the city said, yeah, we know that you issued those bonds solely based upon project revenues. And we know that investors knew what they were buying, but we, city, think you should have known better. The fact that that project went into default is a management problem. And if you do it again, it could impact your general obligation bond rating, which is completely crazy. But again, we see these threats to our budgets and our fiscal situations from places that we might not expect. This slide is one of my favorites. Your staff is dealing every day with threats against the banking industry, check washing, ACH threats. There was a situation that arose last year where a community in Michigan closed on a series of bonds. There was a hacker that got in between the city and the bond trustee, and at closing, the investors wired money to an account that was not the city's. There was a $20 million loss associated with that transaction. So this bank fraud thing is a big problem. So we had Anthropic, one of the large AI labs that came out with its new model called Mythos, which they're not actually, since I wrote this presentation, allowed to use in the United States anymore. It is so powerful that it was released only to the Apples and the Microsofts of the world so that they could use it to address vulnerabilities in their software. That's how powerful it was. And then we we see an article, it turns out that the source code was left on an unsecured web server by Anthropic. So we have threats to our finances and our survival as an organization that are well beyond our control as well. Okay, so where does this take us? This takes us to, I think, a pretty serious exploration of how should we think about crafting our fiscal 2027 budget in an environment where we have threats over not only our ability to control our costs in some cases, or to deal with exogenous threats like hacking and those kinds of things, but in an environment where we may not be able to raise locally one of the most powerful sources of revenue that we have access to as a Kansas local government. And if we have expectations that the legislature in the next session is going to do what it tried to do in the last 2 sessions, which is to completely take away your power as a governing body to set a levy rate that makes sense for your community, is it incumbent upon you to think about that and take action today to avoid that situation going forward? One of the things, for instance, you might consider, I know that you have a separate debt service fund. There's no levy rate assigned to that debt service fund. You have dollars that come into that are associated with special assessment revenues and other kinds of things. Back in the day, when we last had levy caps, you might remember me telling you that that debt service levy was excluded from that cap. We collectively, local governments, the bond industry, so financial advisors, bond counsel, things like that, took legislation to the committees and said, hey, look, y'all, the last time you did this sort of property tax capping thing, you included an exception for debt service levies. Here's the language from the prior statute that included this. I am sure when this legislation comes up again that we will again try to have that adult conversation with the tax writing committees to say, hey, look, you don't blow up Kansas bonding. Most rated Kansas communities are in the AA category. There is not a problem of cities in Kansas or counties in Kansas or even school districts in Kansas getting themselves in trouble with debt. As a state, our local governments have been very good stewards of their local dollars. And so don't make debt more expensive and don't make it impossible for small communities. Have this fixed. If you have levy assigned to a debt service fund, and if we're able to get that exception in that legislation, then that levy would be protected and you would have the ability to have access to debt service funded by property taxation that would not be capped by that legislation going forward. As I mentioned, one other thing you might consider is to accelerate debt issuance plans from the next couple years to today. Just a quick reminder under federal tax law, if we issue taxes and bonds today, you have to have a reasonable expectation you're going to spend those proceeds within 3 years. So we can't borrow ahead to 2047. It's really only the next couple budget cycles that we can look at. All right, I'm going to leave you with this. Do I have any good news? And the good news is, if you can't read this, don't worry, your job is way too dehumanizing for us to ever ask a robot to do it. So, Mr. Mayor, with that, I'll leave you with that little smile, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? That was a ton of information.
Yeah, and more than happy to come back as you start to dig into budget and have questions along the way, or just route those through staff. I'm happy to tackle those as best I can.
Can we get a copy of this deck?
Sure.
Thank you.
No questions? Come on, Ron, don't let me out.
I stole all this candy.
Well, I know, huge thank you from staff. I know through the legislative session, obviously we, as part of the new rules for Assistant 2s, and Kara and Trey track the legislative session, but in addition to that, we lean on folks like Jeff and the league to kind of keep us abreast of what's happening. I know Jeff spent a lot of time in Topeka during the legislative session trying to provide testimony on behalf of ourselves and many, many other communities and really helping us to kind of navigate and understand the very complicated mechanics of the lots of versions.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not sure Jeff said all of that, but I think at one point there were like 12 different versions of things.
It was very hard to track.
It was very
so
hard to
hard to
track.
track.
So, a lot of thank you from our side for that.
Great to see you all. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jeff. Last piece is just a reminder for everyone who doesn't realize it's coming. Next week is my favorite holiday in Edgerton, July 3rd/4th. So I asked my esteemed colleague Kara to model for you the new America 250 merchandise so that everyone can show off their patriotic spirit. If you'd like to purchase it, it's at the green space. So yeah.
Super sweet t-shirts this year.
Yeah, with awesome logo that obviously highlight not only America's 250th anniversary, but the downtown Edgerton and the eagle stuffy with his hooded sweatshirt and the cup and all that stuff. So all that stuff is available at the green space, and then we hope everyone can join us next Friday. So we're kicking it off with the America 250 breakfast that includes pancakes and sausage and drink, and it's a $5 ticket. Unless you're a veteran, that's free, or if you're a kid under 5, that's free. We'll have some kids activities during the day. That includes the eagle demonstration, both bald eagle, live bald eagle, and golden eagle, so it'd be really awesome. Then kind of in the mid-afternoon, there's a Founding Fathers scavenger hunt through Edgerton in the afternoon through the park, so Brittany's always working her magic. So that'll be awesome. And then obviously in the evening, the 3rd of July, the community picnic and fireworks show. Gates open at 6. Lots and lots of activities there. All the normal stuff, plus an amusement ride and some additional shows, and obviously picnic and ice cream, those kind of things. Huge thank you to, we have a couple of sponsors, both Lennar at the New Dwyer Farms and Asa Abaloy out at LPKC. So yeah, it's my favorite day, and even better when you're celebrating 250 years of freedom. So if you need any extra details, check out our website. That's all I have tonight.
Okay, the only thing I have on mind is, really I'm calling full council tonight to see if you guys have availability on July 16th for a special meeting. So that'll be the 3rd Thursday in July, 7 p.m. No?
16.
Yeah, town.
Was planning to be out of town? I can be here if I need to.
We'll say you will.
Sorry, two calendars.
Okay. So the reason for the special meeting, and I'll have Todd help me through this, but the MAC Digital has filed an appeal of the Plan Commission final site plan route, so which comes to City Council. Todd, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, it's going to be a hearing that they're allowed to present their case to council. It's quasi-judicial format, so you would essentially hear what they had to say. There would be a presentation about what the ruling was and why it was appropriate from the city's perspective, and then you'll have an opportunity then to review that decision. So we're trying to get a special meeting set up just to make sure we don't have a big drawn out thing that's gonna delay you guys from business at other meetings, so.
Okay, well, if there's no questions or comments on that, I mean, we know what we know right now.
Yeah.
Until we actually have the meeting or the hearing, then it is what it is. So, I'll have staff set the meeting for July 16th at 7 p.m. I don't have any other reports. Future meeting reminders: July 9th, City Council meeting; July 14th, Planning Commission; Now, July 16th is the special council meeting for the NUMAC, appeal. July 23rd, city council meeting, August 11th, planning commission, August 13th, city council meeting. With there being no further business, the events are at the bottom of the page. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Have a motion and a second, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all.